Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Governor Earl Ray Tomblin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Today is a real honor for West Virginia as we welcome the greatest president of our generation back. Welcome back to our state for the second time in less than a year. Before we hear from today's honored guest, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my good friend and our senior United States Senator, Joe Manchin. Now, as many of you know, Joe and I have worked together for more than 20 years to improve West Virginia. And several of those years overlap with the leadership of President Bill Clinton that led to dramatic growth in the economy, not only in our state, but across our nation. Together, Joe and I worked to make significant changes in West Virginia that improved our business climate and helped create jobs. We also know that times have been tough over the last few years, and we both remain committed to fighting for our coal industry and our coal miners, as well as our great state. Now, although my time as your governor is coming to an end, my commitment to serving my fellow West Virginians will continue. And I have great confidence Senator Manchin will carry on that fight in Washington as well as here at home. I plan to work tirelessly during the remainder of my term to not only ensure that our coal continues to power the nation, but to bring in new jobs that will help our residents, particularly those in southern West Virginia. And I know that as president, Hillary Clinton will help us with those efforts Hillary will help us as we diversify our economy and create new opportunities for those who have called this region home for generations. Now, Democrats have always been there for West Virginia, and we remain committed to helping our people realize the bright futures they have in our state and our nation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce my good friend, a man who shares that vision with me, our United States Senator, Joe Manchin. Let's give him a warm welcome.
First of all, thank you all so much. I appreciate everyone being here. We've been on the road today with the president, and we just came back from Logan. It was a tough area. We have a lot of challenges in West Virginia right now. A lot of people are hurting. And there were some people that recommended, that said, President Clinton, maybe we should go somewhere else. Maybe we shouldn't go down into the coal fields. And he says, no, I want to be there. He says, I know how difficult. I know the challenges. And I've said this. I said he could have chosen anything else, but he said he wanted to be here. He wants to hear the concerns. He wants to work with you. Bill and Hillary Clinton have the compassion that we need for West Virginia. And I've said that all along. I've served with a lot of different people, and you all have given me the privilege to basically be able to serve you in so many different capacities. I've got to put myself in a position to help my state, and I've always done that. When I was Secretary of State, I wanted to be governor because I thought I could help more. Being governor, I wanted to be a senator because I thought I could help more. I want to be in a position that will help, and right now we have challenges. I would only say this. We have a primary coming up next Tuesday. I support Hillary Clinton for president. But I want to tell you why. I want to tell you why I support Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders is a good man. I know Bernie. I've served with Bernie for 6 years. Bernie helps this process. But when all is said and done, we've got to get something accomplished in Washington, and right now that's very difficult. The people that know you best is the people that you work with every day. We build relationship, we build friendships, we trust each other once you have a relationship. And that's what we try to do. Well, in Washington, there are 46 Democrat senators right now. 46 of us, and I'm one, 40 of us have endorsed Hillary Clinton because they know her, they trust her, they've worked with her, and she's willing to get things done and sit down and work and do the hard work. Bernie's a good man, but he only has one. If you look at the whole Congress, there's 535 of us, 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate. Hillary has 200. 200 people that believe in her, that's willing to come out and endorse and work with her. And Bernie has 8. That doesn't say that Bernie doesn't have a lot of contribution. He is going to have a lot of contribution. This is all about who can move this country forward. And I've said this is a troubled world we live in. A troubled world. That president said in that first day in office, we could have a tremendous crisis around the world. There is only one person, and I mean this with the bottom of my heart, one person I feel that can protect my country, protect my children, protect my state, and that's Hillary Clinton. So, I know it's been difficult and the challenges we've had, and I've disagreed with the president on his energy policy, President Obama. I've been very openly disagreeing on that because I think it takes an all-in energy policy. And I said sometimes as friends, we don't always agree with our friends. Sometimes as a friend, you say something that makes me mad. But as your friend, I'm going to sit down and see if we can work through it. And that's what this is all about, relationships. I've had a relationship for over 25 years with Bill and Hillary Clinton. I've always trusted them. They've always done what they said they would do, and they've always been there for us. When I was governor, and we had the mine tragedies we've had all over the state, whether it be Aracoma, UBB, guess who called me first? Bill and Hillary Clinton. What can we do, Joe? How can we help? So I know the passion they have for us and the compassion they have for West Virginia. I know that basically there's one person that I can go to, well, 2 people that I can go to, that understand who we are, coming from the state of Arkansas. So I do put my trust, hope, and faith because I have to be able to sit down and say, let me tell you where we have challenges. Let me tell you how many people are hurting in West Virginia. And let me tell you how I think we can work together to move forward. And that is my friends, Bill and Hillary Clinton. Without further ado, I want to introduce to you West Virginia's friend, our friend, one of the finest presidents we've ever had in the United States of America, President Bill Clinton.
Take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama. Take me home, country road.
Whoa. Thank you, West Virginia. I want to say, first of all, I very much enjoyed this day. I started off making 2 stops here this morning, and then we drove down to Danville, and then we drove down to the Logan Middle School, and I saw a lot of people on the way, got a lot of good food, bought a couple of books at a bookstore here, and met a lot of people from West Virginia. It was wonderful. And I want to thank Governor Tomlin for making the trip with me, and I want to thank Senator Manchin for making the trip and a lot of trips we've made over the years and for their support for Hillary. I want to thank your state chair, Belinda Beaufort, and Pat Maroney, the national committeeman, and John Perdue, who hosted me in his hometown. Thank you very much. And for the incredible discussion I had there about this drug and heroin epidemic that we're all facing in America that has hit West Virginia so hard. I met the local judge that started the drug court. I met a young man who had been got out of prison. I saw what communities can do if they get on this and they treat it like a public health problem and treat these young people like they've got potential and they want to give them their lives back. It was really encouraging. And I'm looking forward to Hillary being here tomorrow and the conversations that she has with West Virginians about that and other things. I want to thank former Governor Caperton for endorsing Hillary and Jay Rockefeller, who put out an endorsement for her yesterday. And I want to thank Marika Lee, our field organizer here, and the teachers groups and all the others who have endorsed and are helping her. Look, has this been a crazy year or what? Right? It's weird. But there is a reason for it. I can hardly remember a time when there was so much promise and so much progress, and yet people still were very worried. I can hardly remember a time when in the larger world we live in, there was so much promise and so much peril, which you read about all the time. I remember when the last State of the Union president gave his last State of the Union address, he said, well, you know, I know we got a lot of problems, but we are doing better than any other big country in the world. That's factually true. We have more job growth in the country than any other time since that other Democratic president, whatever his name is, was president. And he said, well, wait. And he said, but that's factually true. And we got over 90% of our people with health care for the first time ever. And West Virginia did take the Medicaid expansion, which was a very good thing the governor did. That's factually true. We got the best science and technology base. We've got all these other assets, and we've got the best system of education and training. We just need to make sure that a child's education from the beginning doesn't depend upon his or her zip code, that everybody can get a good education. And we got to make sure that everybody can go to and get out of college debt-free, and the people that are up to their ears in debt now have to be able to manage that debt as a small percentage of their income so it doesn't keep them from contributing to this country's future and living their own lives. That's all factually accurate. But the problem is that 80% of our people in America still haven't had a pay raise since the crash, if you adjust for inflation. And there are a lot of young people that are up to their ears in debt. And then you have places like the southern part of this state, which are particularly distressed in pockets all over America. I saw some of them in Indiana a couple of days ago, and then all of a sudden I'm in a town where there is a plant making Mercedes-Benz in America, selling all of them to China with a lot of happy workers. So everywhere you go, there's this up, down, up, down, up, down. How are you supposed to make sense of it? Here's what I want to say. Hillary's running for president because she thinks we can never be satisfied until we live in a country of shared prosperity, where everybody can see themselves in the future in a country where we all rise together. And that we can't leave anyone out or anyone behind. And that means, first, you got to have the right ideas. How are you going to raise incomes, create jobs, create businesses, reduce inequality? And I think what'd you say? Yeah, well, that would be a good start. I agree with that. But look, for example, I'll just give you an example. We do need to raise the minimum wage, but we need jobs that pay way more than the minimum wage. And we need to reduce inequality in a way that there's two ways to do it, I mean, you can just make everybody on top poor. That's not what anyone has in mind. We want to all rise together. And the biggest problem here is no longer these big banks. That's been largely fixed by the Dodd-Frank law. There are now 50,000, 60,000 fewer people working on Wall Street than there were the day of the crash. Yet New York City's doing great. Why? Because of young people like you, and because they can get ordinary bank loans, and instead of gambling, people are investing so we can all grow together. We need that everywhere. And the real problem is that corporations for the last 20 to 30 years have steadily and it's become a steamroller in the new century, started taking more and more and more of their profits and giving it only to shareholders and to top management instead of sharing it with their employees, their communities, and even their customers and new products. And we've got to change that. And as nearly as I can determine, Hillary's the only person who's actually put out a plan that says, look, we need a series of carrots and sticks that give companies incentives to share their profits with the people that make the money, the people that work there, and their families and their communities. And if a corporation moves overseas and they've gotten benefits from us, they ought to give them back, and then we should invest it in the people that are creating jobs here at home so they can raise their incomes. So she believes we need a big national infrastructure program, roads and bridges and ports and airports, but something that would really help West Virginia is something that's under the ground. If every single person, no matter how remote in this country, had access to rapid, affordable broadband, then every American would be in the national and international economy, and you could not be isolated here. She believes, and I assure you, I have given this speech in every other part of the country in some of the most prosperous areas. She believes we have to have a special strategy for Appalachia and every other area of America where the unemployment rate is higher, the poverty rate is higher, and the investment is lower. And her proposal would direct infrastructure and other resources here and give people a whopping tax credit if they invested to help you build a new economy. And you have 2 or 3 places right now, 2 or 3 places in this state right now with the plans there. All they need is the infrastructure and the incentives to invest so we can start rising again. It's all very well to be upset about something. You got to figure out what you're going to do about it. The presidency is a doing job. So this is important. It's important that we do something about the cost of college, but she thinks the best way to do it is not to promise free tuition in all public schools for 2 reasons. One is the states have to come up with 1/3 of the money under that plan, and there's no way West Virginia and a lot of other places could do it. The other is there are a lot of people who go to private small schools that target children of working class families, children of first-generation immigrants, children from historically black colleges and universities. They ought to be able to get some help too, and you don't want to bankrupt the small schools while you're just helping the public schools. So Hillary's position is, wherever you're from, you ought to be able to get free tuition if you need it. And if you have lower incomes, you ought to be able to get a lot more help if you need it. And if you're right on the edge, you ought to be able to have 10 hours a week of work-study money, because that'll help hold down the cost of college. But those of us who can afford to send our kids to school should do it, because you should use our taxes to create middle-class jobs in an infrastructure bank and in other things to invest in America's future. And then the debt. How many of you know somebody with a lot of college debt? Okay, let me say this. The average college debt in America is $24,000 now, but a lot of people have much higher debt, particularly if they went to law school or medical school or whatever. I passed the biggest increase in college aid since the GI Bill when I was president, and inflation in college costs ate it alive. Now, here's the problem. Too many people have had to borrow money outside of the federal loan program. So they've got a loan that they can't refinance. Y'all know that the only loan in America you cannot refinance is a college loan. So Hillary says, let's treat it like every other loan. Let people refinance it. Treat it like a home mortgage. Let people refinance it. If just we did that one thing, 25 million young Americans would save an average of more than $2,000 tomorrow morning. If we just did that one thing. And then If you got a mortgage, you can pay it off over 20 to 30 years. So she believes an education is just as much of a lifetime asset as a mortgage, a home. You agree with that? As a matter of fact, it'll probably last longer because a lot of the young people in this audience are going to live to be 90 or 100 years old. So her position is give people 20 years to pay it off. No matter how much they borrow, their monthly payment can never be more than 10% of their after-tax income. And if they borrow less, they on the average, it'd be less. And if it's not paid off over 20 years, forgive the West, you will have contributed enough to your country's economic productivity to do that. Now think what that means. Everybody could move out of their parents' home. If a young person has a job they don't really like, but they took it to pay their debt off, and there's a job over here they would like, they can take the job now because the repayment will go down with the salary going down. And suppose somebody here in Charleston wants to borrow $50,000, $60,000 to open an organic bakery or some other small business. Under the current system, a young millennial with a student debt could not do it because this would be a cloud on your credit, and if, like most small businesses, you didn't make much money the first year, you couldn't pay the loan. Under the new system, it wouldn't affect you because if you didn't make any money, you wouldn't owe anything that year. And it wouldn't keep people from loaning you the money because they could see it was a fixed and limited part of your income. If you had a mortgage-based debt replacement scheme and debt-free college, it would unleash the energies of millions and millions of young people in this country and help us to all rise together. It's a very important thing we could do. Now, I also think it's important that we recognize that some of these social problems we got are a big impediment to our growth. And you know it here in West Virginia. This epidemic of prescription drug and heroin abuse is paralyzing America. And so when Hillary became the first person to propose a special development plan for coal country, she also proposed a $10 billion plan to treat the drug problem like public health epidemic with more mental health and treatment facilities and supporting innovative things like the drug court program I saw today in the southern part of your state. But I think it's important to recognize that this could give us the chance to start working together as one America again, because this problem is an equal opportunity killer. It's killing Republicans and Democrats alike. And we are very close to having a real consensus in the Congress to do something about this together. And look, I personally, in the last 3 years, have had the unhappy duty of calling 5 friends of Hillary's and mine, 5, whose children died, 3 since Christmas. It's been an agony for everybody. When my first friend, who was very close to me, lost his son, who was a wonderful young man, he helped my foundation to start working to get this miracle drug, naloxone, out to all the college campuses and high schools and other things. And so first thing we did was get an injection form of this that police and other first responders can get for much cheaper than it was ever available before. And then we found another little drug company, Adapt, I love those guys, who provided the first nasal spray version of this naloxone ever and promised to put it in every high school in the United States, which means all I have to do now with our foundation is to get it in every junior high school, first responder, everything else. But it's much easier for people who never had to deal with this to use the nasal spray. So we're all doing what we can, but we've got to deal with this, and we've got to deal with this together, and we can't pretend that we can bring back southern West Virginia if you've got the highest mortality rate in the country from this kind of drug problem. If no kid can finish high school because of addiction. If middle schools have become a battleground for them to do it. The other thing is there are too many young people who are in jail for too long for nonviolent offenses. And there is increasingly a bipartisan consensus that we ought to let them out, but Hillary said don't set them up training and job placement, and don't let somebody refuse to hire them because they've been in jail. The whole purpose of letting them out is so we can all rise together and they have to have a second chance. I think that has to be done. So I think she has the best ideas for the economy and for allowing us to live together. But we also got to be citizens together. This Supreme Court appointment's a big deal. We do need a Supreme Court that will expand voting rights, not restrict them. That will protect labor rights, not take them away. I believe we need immigration reform, and I believe, look, I live in New York. I know some things just because I live there that a lot of people have forgotten. And I'm really proud that Hillary was the first candidate, because of her experience as Secretary of State, to speak out against the demonization of American Muslims, because we know, living in New York, that more than 200,000 of your fellow Americans who are Muslims were murdered on 9/11, who didn't have anything to do with this. And so this brings me to my second point. In addition to the best ideas, there are two things that could wreck this effort to raise our economy and our living standards. One is things get so bad in the rest of the world, our economy can't grow at all. Too much turmoil. It's already slowed us down some. So Hillary knows we can't, as one four-star retired general said on television, I heard him last week, said, look, it's all fine to say we're going to rebuild the military, but I've been doing this a long time. We are not going to kill our way to victory in this war. We have got, we got to be able to have defense, diplomacy. We got to make a world with more partners and fewer adversaries. And that means we need every Muslim who loves America, hates terror, and believes in the future to help us win this battle for the hearts and minds of this world over the internet. And we got to do it together. And the third thing we need is somebody who can make something happen in Washington. It's all very well to talk about all these things, but as soon as you get through taking the oath of office, whether you're a good speaker, a great speaker, so-so speaker, the doing counts more than the talking. And so I believe Hillary has the best ideas. I think she is the only person really fully qualified to deal with this incredible blizzard of foreign policy challenges that we face, so that we can, you know, not only do what we ought to do to make the world safer, but keep bad things from sinking us. But I know she's the best change maker. And that's the most important thing. So I want to just say a couple of things and then I'll wrap up. I met Hillary 45 years ago last month. Actually, today's May 1st, 2 months ago now, March. And I must say, from that day to this, I have been just dumbstruck by how many times we'll be talking about some big problem and everybody will be emoting about it and how terrible this is or how terrible that is. And she will always say, yeah, but what are we going to do? What can we do to make it better? How can we change things? What can you do? What can I do? What should we do now? We've talked about this enough. Now, what are we going to do? That's what America needs now, a doer. We got to get off the dime. We need a doer. And so when we were in law school, she learned that people who had been citizens of America, their families, for well over 100 years, had still been systematically kept out of the political process. Then when she got out of law school, and there weren't many women lawyers, she had all these fancy offers. She turned them all down, went to work for the Children's Defense Fund, and went to South Carolina to find out why teenagers, mostly African American, were being held in prison with adults for years and having their lives ruined. They filed a report, changed the whole juvenile justice system of the state. I could give you 1,000 examples like this. Everything she ever touched, she made better. Then she came to Arkansas to be with me, and we lived in our version of Appalachia in the Arkansas Ozarks, and she gave all these poor working people access to the courts of our state for the first time ever by setting up the first legal aid program they'd ever had up there. And then when I became president, after she had done all this work in Arkansas on education and other things, everything she did from that day until she left the Secretary of State's office, she always had Republican support for. Now, I know they've all been mean to her the last 3 or 4 years, but they just don't want to run against her. That's what they do. I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to run against either. But I'll give you an example. We tried to pass health care reform, and we didn't have 60 votes. And you remember that when anytime somebody comes telling you what they're going to do in health care, you say, show me your 60 votes in the Senate. We passed the Affordable Care Act this time without a single solitary vote to spare. So when we didn't, Hillary went to work with other senators, including the late Senator Kennedy, to got the children's health insurance bill passed. There are 8.4 million kids that have health insurance under that today. It's an important part of the Affordable Care Act. And here's the point. Here's the point. She said, we got to pass this, and I want you to put it in the balanced budget bill, which I did because we knew no Republican would be caught dead voting against the balanced budget, right? I mean, they've been talking about, well, they double and triple and quadruple the debt all those years. They needed to kind of be for something. So we did it, and there they were. 76% of the Republicans voted for the children's health insurance bill. And then she went to the member of the House of Representatives, I think who disliked me the most, the Republican leader, Tom DeLay, and she said, Congressman, I know we don't agree on much. He looked at her in disbelief. He said, come on, Hillary, do we agree on anything? She said, oh, yeah, you love your kids. He said, what's that got to do with anything? She said, Congressman, no matter how much we disagree with you or how many mean things you say about the president, you adopted your children, and we honor you for it. And he was stunned. He had no idea. The foster care system in this country is coming apart at the seams. All these kids are not being adopted because people are afraid to adopt non-infant children. And they're afraid to adopt children with special needs. So you're going to have all these kids aging out of foster care, no living allowance, no job training, no college education, no job placement. It's going to be a disaster, and these kids are like your kids. You can't let it happen. So he said, what do you want to do? He said, come on. And Hillary said, well, you're a Republican. I know you like tax cuts. Let's give a whopping tax credit to people who will adopt a non-infant child. Let's give a bigger one for people who will adopt a child with special needs. And then you have to give us some money so that people who understand child care can support these families. And some to help the kids that are going to age out. Here's what happened. The bill flew through Congress like a hot knife through butter. I signed it. By the time I left office, there had been an 80% increase in the adoption of children out of foster care. She always makes something good happen. And you can ask Joe Manchin when she was a senator from New York, she talked President Bush into making big commitments so we could rebuild the city, not just the buildings, but the lives. She stayed with people that went through as many as 10 plastic surgeries after 9/11. She spearheaded the passage of a bill that guaranteed the first and second responders lifetime care if they develop cancer or respiratory problems. The kind of thing you want for the coal miners in West Virginia. And she worked with little manufacturers and farmers. You'd probably be surprised, but it's our third biggest source of income in New York's agriculture. She was the first New York senator in history to be on the Armed Services Committee. And they got a lot of interesting bills passed. She did, with John McCain, with Lindsey Graham, with other Republicans. If you served in the National Guard in West Virginia and went to Afghanistan or Iraq, when you got home, you were entitled as a matter of law to the same care regular military personnel got. If you had post-traumatic stress syndrome, you were entitled to years and years and years of support till you got to where you could live with it. If you had traumatic brain injury, there was new and more generous support. And then, thank you. And she did big and little things. But when she ran for re-election, she carried Long Island, which is, but the head of the Farm Bureau in Long Island, all the farmers in New York are family farmers. He endorsed her. And the press goes up to the guy and says, "Joe, I thought you were a Republican." He said, "I thought I was too." And they said, "Well, how can you endorse her?" He said, "Look, I've been working for 20 years to help the family farmers in this state. And here's what I know. Every politician, no matter what their party, they all sound good at election time. But she is the only one who has ever actually done anything to help these farmers stay on their land, and I am for her. And that's where she'll be for you, too, if you make her president." So, and Senator Manchin and I were talking today about this conundrum with Iran, but even the people that don't like the deal, like the Iranian sanctions, which she did, and we got China and Russia to sign off on it. I didn't think she could do that. She negotiated, her team did, and she passed through the Senate a treaty which reduces the chance of intentional or accidental nuclear exchange with Russia. That makes you safer. That's a good thing in this troubled world. Took 67 votes. That's a lot of Republicans. She got them. She negotiated an end to a shooting war between Israel and the terrorist group Hamas in Gaza. And when she left office, the approval rating of the United States was 20 points higher than it was when she took office. She's the best change maker I've ever known. Look, you know, I understand why people are emotional and angry, but I'm a grandfather and a very happy and grateful one. I'm the oldest person. I'm not all that old, but I'm the oldest man in my family for 3 generations. And I can tell you that one thing I believe I have successfully done is preside over a clan of passionate people who believe in public service, and we all keep score the same way. If I gave you a cell phone and you called my daughter today and you asked her this question, she'd give you the identical answer, and I'm going to. That has been the credo of Hillary's life. What's all this about anyway? There are only 3 things that matter. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? Do children and young people have a brighter future? And are we coming together instead of being driven apart? If you can say yes to that, the rest is background music. And West Virginia needs somebody that will make it possible for you to say yes, yes, yes to that. So be there for her in the primary. Thank you.
Country road.